Hi, this is Brett Ingram, award-winning digital marketer and entrepreneur, and today I want to share with you why every entrepreneur should watch Curb Your Enthusiasm. Curb Your Enthusiasm is an HBO run program by the creator Larry David, who also was the creator of Seinfeld. Seinfeld, obviously, everybody knows it was a mainstream show. It ran for decades. In all honesty, I actually never saw it. I've seen an episode or two. Everybody I know used to talk about it all the time, how much they loved it, how funny it was, and everything else. And Larry, at one point, when he was being interviewed, had said that he and Seinfeld got together, and when they wrote this, they sort of considered it to be a show about nothing, right? The idea was that it was just these people that sort of interacted and went about their daily lives and made observations about things that, a lot of us think or might have also occurred to us, but we never articulated it in the same way. And I remember I saw one interview with him and he was amazed by the fact that the show got picked up, let alone the success that it had. When they wrote the script and they submitted it to see if the network wanted to run it, they didn't really think it was ever going to fly. Not only obviously did it fly, but years later it's one of the most successful sitcoms in all of history. And so Larry David is essentially the same creator, and Curb Your Enthusiasm is sort of like an adult version of Seinfeld in the sense that it's basically, because it's on cable television, because it's on HBO, they're allowed to swear, they're allowed to do things that you can't do on network TV. And so it's a little bit, sometimes a little bit darker, and it's a little bit rougher in terms of the language and things like that, and some of the subject matter. But the fact of the matter is, it's a similar idea from what I understand, even though I'm not a big, I don't know a lot of the Seinfeld stuff. I've seen almost all of the Curb Your Enthusiasms. And so you might be thinking, well, okay, but what does this have to do with business? I mean, whether it's Seinfeld or Curb Your Enthusiasm, they're not really business owners, right? It's not really about running a business or, some successful business person and things like that. Well, I'll tell you directly what it has to do with business is nothing. The story itself has nothing to do with running a business. It's not inspirational. It isn't about, we're going to share some entrepreneurial stories about how to run a successful business, and we're going to show you examples of, it's not Shark Tank and it's not any of these other things. So certainly from a direct perspective, if we're looking at it, from that lens, it has nothing to teach us about business. There are no tips, there are no tricks, there are no tactics for getting ahead or running a business. But it actually has a really valuable lesson if we look at its core, if we look a little bit deeper and we go beyond what the stories are actually about, what the episodes are actually about, and we look at more about the way that they're constructed. And what that is, what it can teach us as entrepreneurs, is the power of authenticity. So in the way that this show is structured, the characters, there are a bunch of them that are repeat characters. So Larry and Jeff, his manager, and Susie, Jeff's wife, and Larry's various love interests, starting with Cheryl Hines in the beginning when she was basically his wife. And those actually, in my opinion, were the funniest. I actually loved Cheryl, and I thought that she was a great addition to the show. I really believe that her reactions to all of Larry's antics just were absolutely hilarious, because he would always make her angry, and you could understand why when you saw the stuff that he was doing. But more to the point, the characters, whether they are transitive characters that come in and out, they have guest stars and other people come on the show and they're there for one episode and then they disappear. There's some repeat characters like Ted Danson, Mary Steenburgen, they're on there, often as Larry's friends and things like that. But the characters feel real and authentic. And it's funny to say because it's obviously, a show that's produced, and while the characters are somewhat themselves, they're also not. Some of them play other characters, some of them play themselves. but the characters feel real and authentic. They feel human, right? They don't feel like overproduced, glamorous caricatures, which is what you see in a lot of television and a lot of shows, or those trite sort of overworked, stereotypes of people that they're so two-dimensional, that they're so phony, that you can just see that you already can tell what the dialogue is going to be and what line is going to come next, because they run the same sort of shtick over and over and over again with the same characters. And look, those formulas work, right? They've worked for sitcoms, they've worked for television shows for decades, which is why they use them. And, the writers get a ton of credit, because even writing some of that stuff, it's incredibly clever. At the same time, there's an inauthenticity, there's a fakeness about it, that while it's a nice escape from reality, it doesn't make us feel connected to the characters in any way. It's hard to relate to them because they feel so phony. They feel like overproduced versions of what a real human being would be. And so again, if we want to watch something for just pure escapism, there's value in it, there's humor in it, there's all these other kinds of things. But if we want anything that feels genuine or relatable, it's pretty hard to be able to do that, right? So the thing of it is, in this show, they do an excellent job of being able to make their actions and their reactions to things feel real. The dialogue, the conversations, the situations, while some of it might be unrealistic or over the top, a lot of it feels genuine and feels real in terms of the way that they react with each other. And so here's the thing. It doesn't matter whether we can relate to or like the characters. I don't like all of the characters on the show personally, in the sense that I wouldn't necessarily want to be friends with them or hang out with them or whatever. Some I would, some I wouldn't, whatever. And we may really hate some of the characters on the show or intensely dislike them. But the fact is, it's hard to deny the fact that they feel like real people. They feel like real characters. They feel like somebody we may have encountered in our actual life, right? And so the scenes also, and this is part of the genius of the show, one of the things that's brilliant about the show is they took what works in television and they took what works in improv, theater, and stage stuff, and they sort of merged it. So in general, the way that it's constructed is the scenes are sort of skeletons, they're sketches. They aren't scripts. And so each character doesn't have a set dialogue where they just deliver the lines that were already written for them, and they deliver, and it comes down to their ability to deliver preset lines. They have sort of the structure of a scene, like you'd see in an improv troupe or whatever, and then they come out and they sort of improv the actual lines a little bit. And so they have flexibility and they have some freedom. And what that allows for is it allows for authentic dialogue, and it allows for improv in terms of the actions and the thoughts and the interactions between everybody. And so, like anything else, it's experimental, right? I mean, sometimes that knocks it out of the park. Sometimes it's awesome. And sometimes it doesn't work that well, right? Sometimes it does, fail to work because there's something about it that just doesn't connect. That is the risk. It's the risk with live theater. It's the risk with improv. It's the reason comedy is so difficult, because making people laugh is not something that you can just pull a string and it works every time. You could get emotions out of people by doing certain things on stage, or by having certain sort of scenes set up where you can evoke certain emotions with people, and you can do it with music as well. And they do this to dramatic effect in a lot of shows and movies and all of that. But because they have an opportunity to produce it, they can go back and they can do it over and over again until they feel it's got that level that they're looking for. Whereas when you're in a live improv, you don't have that ability. You have to read and react to what the audience is doing. And so the Curb Your Enthusiasm setup has a structure that's a lot like that, in the sense that it's not that they don't reshoot any scenes, but the fact is, with just a structure of a scene and sort of the backdrop, they put the characters in, and it's like, go for it. And so the interactions they have are going to be more authentic and real, because It isn't pre-rehearsed. It isn't something that they're just trying to look in the mirror and how am I going to deliver that line to get maximum effect. They don't know what the lines are going to be. Maybe some of them, but for the most part, that's the way it's structured. So if you contrast that to today's world and what we're used to seeing, so from just the TV and sort of media world and movies, we have sitcoms with young, supposedly broke people, but they're living in a 3,000 square foot apartment in New York City or some expensive city. It's completely unrealistic. It's completely ridiculous. Even their poor surroundings look nice. Like everybody's, geez, if that's poor, I wonder what rich looks like, right? I mean, it's absolutely insane. I've seen what a bad apartment looks like in a city, and it doesn't look anything like anything you see in a sitcom. And, the average rent in New York City, they just published a study, it just topped $5,000 a month. I'm sorry, if you're working at a coffee shop, you aren't living in a 3,000 square foot apartment. Also, if you're a young 20-something, you aren't spending, 60 hours a week socializing and having fun. You actually have to work in order to pay your bills, unless you have a trust fund. And so there's something so phony about that again, it's good escapist TV, but no one can relate to it at a real level, because if you're out there in real life, it doesn't resemble anything close to what people actually experience. The other sort of overtread, like worn out sort of thing that is out there in shows nowadays is dialogue that's so rapid fire, because they have an ensemble cast, and they got to get every actor screen time. And so it's one rapid fire, it's like an around the horn rapid fire thing where the camera keeps switching from one character to the next, and they're saying things without any pause in between so they can each get their line in. And while the dialogue in and of itself may not be bad, they're saying it so quickly and reacting to what each other are saying so quickly, there's not even any like pretend that they would have been able to absorb what the person said and react to it that fast. And so it feels fake. It feels rushed, right? The dialogue and the interactions between the characters feels hollow and feels inauthentic. And we can feel that as the audience. Again, it doesn't mean those shows aren't entertaining. They might still be fun to watch and we might like it. But it's so ridiculous that we know it doesn't resemble anything in real life. And the other thing is, you have shows where people are portraying average Joes and Janes that are supposed to be like everybody that we know. They look more like catalog models than anyone living next door to us. If you look back even a few decades ago, right, and you look at a movie like the original Karate Kid. Now you have Ralph Macchio and Elizabeth Shue as the main characters, and she's like the love interest, and he's the karate guy, whatever. But they look, even though they're great actors, they look like normal people. I mean, he's handsome enough, but he isn't a model. She's pretty enough, but she isn't like a supermodel or anything. And they look like people we may have known. They look like people that we could relate to because they look like somebody maybe that did grow up next door. And then when you fast forward and you start to look at more of the more modern day things, not only are the actors overly made up before they go on screen, but they also are in general, much like very attractive on the scale of attractiveness, and so much so that they aren't believable as someone that we're supposed to be portraying as the average person. And so if we look at that as the backdrop to what we're seeing in sort of entertainment, right, and in the media, and then that's just the TV and movie world. And then we take a look at what we're seeing today in the real world of social media and the internet, right? So these are real people that we're sort of interacting with or seeing on screen or whatever, and it's overloaded with curated content. It's become a breeding ground of phony, photoshopped, filtered, over-the-top photos and overproduced videos. This is funny because I have a daughter and two sons. And my daughter is old enough that she sort of missed the early part of the social media age. My older son, it was just on the edge of it, and then my youngest son is sort of going through it right now, being in high school at this moment. And it's amazing to me because, first of all, they say that this affects girls more than it affects boys. But I have to say, seeing what he sees online and seeing how he compares it to himself with his, the way that he works out and the way that his hair looks and the clothes that he wants and things like that, it's amazing the impact this can have on young people growing up, let alone adults or whatever else. But it can really affect them. And the thing of it is, when they're looking at it, it's all phony. We're seeing all the best versions of everybody, right? You meet everyone's representative. You don't meet them. You meet their representative and the best versions of themselves, because if the photos didn't look good, they wouldn't post them. If the videos weren't good, they're overproduced videos where they've doctored things and altered the lighting to make like everything look really good. And they're all trying to scream louder and outdo each other to impress everyone. The whole thing is just a beauty contest with the idea of trying to be more impressive than the other one, so everybody else wants to see you. And it's all about like how popular you can be and how much people react to what you're doing. So everything is just to get an effect. It's to get a reaction instead of anything that's real. And now when we look at AI and artificial intelligence, the fake and machine-produced content is poised to send the BS meter into overdrive. It's going to get to a level of ridiculousness. It's already really bad, but it's going to get even worse. And so if we bring this back full circle and we say, what can curb your enthusiasm teach entrepreneurs about business? It's real simple. It can teach us to be ourselves, to be real, to be authentic, because there's now more a place for normal, right? Normal and real than there ever was, because it's become the exception instead of the rule. Instead of everything being normal and there's an occasional standout or exception or whatever, now everything is doctored and fake and overproduced and phony and forced and all of that. And it's the reason you see rampant depression among people that create social media followings, because of the fact that if they're doing it as an inauthentic version or a doctored version of who they aren't even being true to themselves. And that becomes exhausting to keep up. It becomes exhausting to keep that charade going and that sort of fantasy of what you're supposed to be, the version of yourself that you want everyone to see. Then you never want to be seen in person, because you're never going to look that good when they actually see you. It's going to be a letdown, And so that's sort of the danger of it. I remember in my entrepreneurial circles, it has nothing to do with physical appearance, but I remember one of the guys that I had the fortune of meeting. He's a super successful entrepreneur, but he told the story one time on stage about how the business that he was in when he was younger, it was profitable, and so he was successful, but he actually hated it. He said, he didn't really like the group of people, his customers that he was working with. He didn't like himself when he was in that, whatever that niche was that he was in. And he said he literally was paranoid to a point that he felt so inauthentic that when he heard a car pull up outside and slow down, he'd peek out through the window to make sure it wasn't like one of his customers chasing him down or whatever. He was an honest guy. It's not that he wasn't doing an honest business, but he just felt so wrong about what he was doing. So he literally just shut that all down. He totally reinvented himself as who he really was. And he said he was never happier or more successful in his entire life. And we see examples of this over and over and over again. If we look closely, even in the last couple of decades, you can see examples of it. But they're the exception. They're the people that people say, wow, the bravery that they've got, to be who they are. Bravery? I mean, that's who we are. Be who we are. With so many people pretending to be something that they aren't, or only sharing edited and overproduced versions of what they think are their best qualities, we're starving for real. We're starving for authentic. In fact, authenticity is going to be the new currency. The information age is over. It's dead. We're already overwhelmed by so much info that it's a commodity that's totally devalued. It's everywhere. We're entering the authenticity age, where people want real and genuine. Human beings, by our very nature, have flaws. So pretending to be perfect doesn't draw people in anymore. It polarizes. It pushes them away instead of attracting them, because people are tired of the perfect version of everything. They know it isn't real. Being authentic, not perfect, is now the way to stand out. But it does take courage to put ourselves out there, flaws and all. But if we want to build a brand and a following that's real, the smart way to do it, that will endure long term, is just to be ourselves. So the takeaway here is that Curb Your Enthusiasm is a perfectly imperfect show. Look, some scenes and episodes are, roll on the floor laugh worthy, and others fall flat. But there's a feeling of real authenticity with the characters that make the show engaging. More importantly, it's a lesson we can take as entrepreneurs to be ourselves. Have confidence that we are enough, that people will like us for who we are and want our products and services because of that. We'll feel more happy and fulfilled and validated, and we won't need to waste energy pretending to be someone we aren't.